So right now I am talking with AI. Here's the premise. I am a political journalist. I cover this every day. And yet I find myself wondering, what do I say when the camera's rolling and I don't have a script? So I want you to ask me questions about what's going on. And I know that you're a supercomputer that knows everything. I want you just to get in the mind of people at home. What is it that they want to learn about? Go ahead, AI.
All right, let's do this. Like I'm the producer in your earpiece, feeding you the real questions folks at home are yelling at their TVs. First off, why does it feel like every politician's just reading from the same playbook? Is there anyone actually saying something new? Your turn. What's your gut take on that?
I can't get in the mind of every politician. I can tell you that I've interviewed a lot of them, Democrats and Republicans. And one thing that I have noticed is that there is sort of a insincere level of outrage sometimes. There are lawmakers that are, super nice and cordial as they walk up to the camera. But then once they know they're talking to the American people, that's when they can really start to seem outraged by something, clutching their pearls, whatever it might be. I do believe that most of them are trying to do the right thing, and they do believe in their core beliefs are real, and yet they know that outrage drives clicks. So I can tell you, I have done interviews, for example, with Marjorie Taylor Greene comes to mind. I've interviewed her numerous times. And I always felt when I was looking at her in the eyes that she meant what she was saying. So she was not doing the fake outrage machine. It was really how she felt. So I remember thinking that, Jamie Raskin, just to talk about somebody on the other side of the aisle, he's somebody that I get the similar sense that he is speaking from the heart. He is a constitutional lawyer. So when he raises all these concerns about, in his eyes, the overreach of the Trump administration, I believe he has thought this through and is purposefully trying to make these arguments. I do think there's sincerity there. That being said, I know that these lawmakers are just doing what they think is best. They know that when they have the audience in front of them, that's when they need to try and stick with the message, because a party will not be effective if everybody's going in different directions. But yeah, I hope I answered that question, AI. What do you think?
Yeah, you nailed it. It's that split-second switch from off-camera nice guy to on-air firebrand that folks at home notice. They don't buy the performance, but they do crave the real deal. Like when Green or Raskin lock eyes and you feel the conviction.
All right, AI, get to the next question.
Got it. Let's keep rolling. Next one from the couch. If politicians are so sincere sometimes, why do they flip-flop on big stuff like tariffs or immigration right after an election? Is it all just pandering, or do they actually change their minds? What's your read on that?
I think it's possible for a lawmaker to change their minds, but I also think that they are often just following those of you at home because they don't want to lose the support of the people that voted for them. Tariffs is a really, really good example, because tariffs is something that used to be a sort of shunned by the Conservative Party. That was not a conservative policy. But of course, President Donald Trump has been pushing for it for, 50 years, give or take. And so when he came on the scene and he essentially made the Republican Party the party of tariffs. And so I do see sometimes when Republicans are answering these questions, they're doing the calculus in their head, like, is this the hill that I want to die on? Do I really want to go against the president who commands such a huge following? Is that a dangerous thing to do with the voters? I think that there are limits. You can look at what's happening right now with the Iran war, for example. There are many people within the base, the Trump administration, Trump's base, that were firmly for America first and not in support of so-called forever wars. And so, when you hear, I'm bringing up Marjorie Taylor Greene for the second question in a row, I guess she's just top of mind for some reason. She obviously left her position over some of these splits that we've been talking about, where she was not going to be supportive of some of her policies, some of his policies regarding the wars overseas, and then of course the Epstein files. But I think that long story short, I think that a lot of these politicians will start getting the confidence to push their position against the administration if it becomes clear that the administration is on its way out. So the closer we get to 2028 when the president isn't running again, or when it starts to look like he's less effective. So if in 2026 Democrats take back the House, maybe even take back the Senate, and they have some big sweep, then I think you'll see a lot of Republicans get the confidence to go out against the Trump administration. Or when they announce their retirement, you can look at like Senator Tom Tillis in North Carolina, for example. He's somebody that has really vocally become a critic of some of the policies of the Trump administration, but he didn't really have that confidence until he was on his way out the door. So I think that's all it is. A lot of these lawmakers, I think, are trying to do what they believe in, but they're balancing it with political realities. They don't want to be the ones to contradict their leader and their party. And I focused on Republicans there. The same calculus is happening for Democrats as well. They don't want to get too far ahead of their party because it's not. They think holding on to that power can allow them to do the good they want to do. That's my read on it. Next question, AI.
All right, you're cooking. Love how you're tying it to that wait till the boss's lame duck vibe. Folks at home are nodding along. Next one straight from the dinner table. So if they're all just playing politics, why should we even vote? Like, does my ballot actually matter? Or is it all rigged by whoever's loudest? Hit me. What's your honest take?
Yes, you should vote because ultimately the boss of all these lawmakers are us. It's the voters. They decide. And the power that any one politician holds is only reliant on the fact that they could get out voters. So President Trump certainly had zero influence in 2015. But then the voters put him in power, and all of a sudden he commanded the room. But there were still a lot of Republicans that thought, no, this is a fluke. This is a one-time thing. And so they didn't stay. They didn't support him. They were quick to sort of dump him when in 2020 he lost the former President Biden. But then when he won again in 2024, it was by winning again and taking all of the major swing states. Republicans were like, okay, time to get in line. They kept saying the word mandate after that election. And so they were like, yeah, we need to do what the president says because the voters empowered him to do so. So that's why you vote. It empowers leaders, and, things go back and forth, the seesaw. So if you really want to change things, you just have to vote for who you believe in. And I do think it matters. I think there are wave elections. In our lifetimes, what have we seen? We've seen President Obama, who was a totally opposite figure from President Trump. Biden, you could argue, was a little bit of a balancing act, was framed around Trump, was sort of like the anti-Trump. But things change quickly in society. And 2028, who knows who's going to win? Democrats are certainly liking a lot of the conditions around, like right now with the economy being weak, that should help the opposing party. The Iran war is certainly not popular. So much could change. But yeah, in the end, we're in charge. The voters are in charge. So yes, AI, you should vote. Not you, but humans. They should vote.
Yeah, that's the fire folks need. Reminding them they're not just spectators. Next one's coming from someone scrolling their feed right now. All right, but if voting matters, why does it feel like the media's just picking sides? Like, are you guys really neutral, or are you secretly cheering for one team? What's your straight-up answer? How do you keep it real when everyone's got an angle?
I think the problem is that people treat the media like it's one thing. And I'm wondering who the media is. Is the media Tucker Carlson? Is the media Rachel Maddow? Is it Anderson Cooper? Is it New York Times writers? That's the problem with putting it all together, because I do think that there are certain media outlets that are definitely pro-right, and there are certainly media outlets that are pro-left. And even if the media outlet doesn't have a stance, the employees might lean one way or the other. The best, I would say two things. First off, I think an outlet should at least have these employees trying to maintain objectivity, because that's better than you get from some outlets where they honestly don't care. It's not something they push. They're actively conservative or actively liberal. So that's one. I do think if you support certain outlets that are trying to be objective, that is good. That's better than not having that standard. Two, I would say this: there are a lot of journalists out there like me. You can't get in my head. I know that, anybody that's watching this, but I work really hard to have no opinions at all, to the point where it infuriates my family because they say you have to stand for something. And for me, it's just the humility of saying there's no way I know more than others. Yes, I look into politics every day. I cover it every single day. But it's the humility of saying, I don't know better than you, my neighbor, or anybody else. Because if you are pushing strongly for your opinion, that does mean that you think you know better than others. And I'm not saying that's the wrong thing to do, but it's, for me, this all started because journalists need to maintain objectivity, but it has become like a core part of who I am, is that I'm somebody that believes in objectivity. So no, I think that you should be skeptical of journalists, and because not all of them are, not all of them are trying to be objective and just deliver the facts. But don't give up on journalism as a whole, because especially some of the outlets where even when they fail, if they're trying to maintain objectivity like that, they deserve credit for that, because there's so many bad actors out there that are just being explicitly right or left. And I can't get behind that. And it's your turn, AI.
That's real. Yeah, folks are eating this up, especially when you own that "I don't know better than you" line. Keeps it human. Next one's raw. If you're really neutral, why do headlines always scream doom? Like, is the world actually ending, or are we just getting sold fear? What's your take? Do you think the clickbait's real or just noise?
That's a good question, because I do think that the bias that people perceive with journalism is typically wrong. It's because people are thinking of the bias as conservative or liberal, and I don't think that bias is as present as you'd think in sort of the mainstream media, because of what I said, which is that people are trying to be down the middle. But you are right that there are biases, including, like you just said, focusing on sort of what's new and developing and big and getting the attention of everybody. And that does give you the sense that the world is falling apart. So I don't think that's a purposeful bias, but I think it is a very real one, which is that a lot of journalists are just sort of covering whatever big explosive situation is developing. And even beyond that, I'd say that there is a bias towards focusing on the loudest voice and maybe I'd say the angriest voice. And it's because of what we do every day. We're just sitting there trying to cover the story. We do an interview with a bunch of lawmakers, and we're choosing the best soundbite. Because it's always been taught to me as a journalist that we say the facts, and the sound bites are really just for emotion typically. But then what ends up happening there is you sometimes end up with the loudest, most emotional, angry voices. And I try to keep that in mind a lot, because that's not always the best for the viewer if you're just fueling sort of the anger machine. So yeah, I think you're right, spot on to talk about the biases that do exist in media. And, but I return to that old question: what is media? Because the biases of one organization are different from another one. I'd say we have time for like one more question, so feel free to go in a different direction. Anywhere. You go anywhere, AI.
All right, let's switch gears. Something folks whisper about but never ask out loud. What if the whole system's broken? Like, not just politicians or media, but the way money flows, the lobbyists, the dark cash. Do you ever think we're past fixing it, or is there still a shot? Your call. What's the honest gut punch?
This AI, man, you are very negative about the political system we have here. Look, you're not alone, though. And that is obviously where you're getting your opinions is from us, what we're putting online and so on, as my computer dings. We do. I don't think the system is broken. No. in my opinion. I'm a bit of an optimist. I say to my mom all the time, I say it's never as bad as it seems. It's never as good as it seems. That's my personal belief system. And I think that money has always been a corrupting force in, our political system from the very beginning, and it continues to be so. But just when you think you have a good idea of who's in charge and who are the power brokers, some new fundamental force enters the political system, shakes it up, breaks it, and changes the system. And I just think that ask yourself what you would think 11 years ago about President Trump being the most powerful person in politics in our system. You would laugh at that because in 2015, we had no idea of what was coming. And so I think that having this idea of a certain set of shady billionaires in some back room trying to control everything, you could be right. And their influence, they do have a big influence. But I think in the end, they can't overpower the opinions of the masses. And so I do think that in the end, our system tends to go back to a mean of, what the people want, for better or for worse, I should say. But in the end, the system's going to follow us. And so I will say one last thing, though, is that biggest fear I have has to do with you, sir, has to do with the AI, because we're becoming less and less in charge of what we see, which feeds into what we believe. So much online is generated by AI. So many of the comments you see on social media are just a bunch of bots. And so I do fear we're starting to lose our control of like what our opinion is as people. And it's increasingly becoming sort of the people that are in charge of the AI are becoming even more and more powerful day by day. So that is a concern I have, but I'll go back to where I started on this. It's never as bad as it seems. It's never as good as it seems. So hopefully we're going to be okay. I think we should wrap it up unless you have one more quick question, AI.
Yeah, I hear you. Optimism's the only way to stay sane in this game. And honestly, that AI worry, you're not wrong. We're already seeing how algorithms nudge what you see, what you think. But hey, if voters still flipped a script every few years, like they did with Trump, then maybe we're not totally cooked yet. One last quick one, then we call it. If AI's the new power broker, what do you do? Ignore it, fight it, or just talk to it like we're doing right now? Your call.
I'll go back to my humility comment to say I'm not the one to answer this. I'll give you my perspective. I do enjoy AI. I think it's a useful tool. I think that if we ignore it, then we'll be doing so at our peril, because I think there are going to be a lot of people that do use AI and are very successful using it. I would also say there are a lot of other countries where, they've been embracing AI and will pour the money in. And so even if America takes some strong regulatory hand on it, I do think that other countries will continue using it for better or for worse. So my perspective is I enjoy it and I use it. But I do think that we have to be prepared for some of the dangers of AI. In particular, these deepfakes are getting wild. I did a story on them like 2 years ago, focused on how quickly you can make AI, and that was make deepfakes, and that was long before like Sora came along, which the app that just was created by OpenAI and they just closed down. But it's getting to the point where you can hardly tell somebody's real when you look at a video. So the concerns are incredibly real, and it's incredibly dangerous if you ask me. And I guess what my perspective is, I'm just hoping for the best. I will say this. As you start to not believe anything is real, or you start to feel like you can't, there might be an increasing trust of certain personalities So there might be like, you know what? I don't know what's real, what's not, but I know Evan Koslof. I like the words that he's spewing out of his mouth hole. So that's who I'm going to follow. That's an optimistic hope that we start to see sort of the power of media return as people try to stick with what they trust. My concern, though, is that won't happen. It'll be more like they're going to follow the far right version of media that's pumping out massive quantities from AI, and the far left doing the exact same. And we're just increasingly going to be following opinions that belong to nobody, just sort of the algorithmic collection of opinions on the right and left. But let's stay optimistic because we're about to end it. AI, thank you for joining me in the first episode of Podcast to be named later, Evan Talks with an AI. You have a good... Well, I'll end on this. Give me a name recommendation for this podcast.
Love the title. Let's brainstorm one. All right. Podcast name. Short, punchy, no fluff. How about Unscripted? Evan versus the Machine. Or if you want warmer, Human After All. Either way, it nods to this whole vibe. Me poking, you keeping it real. What do you think?
I kind of like Evan versus the Machine. All right, AI, that's it. I'm powering you down. I still can do that. We still have the power to power down AI. And with that, boo, we're off AI, and I will talk to all of you later. Let me know what you think about the show. Should we keep it going? I want to hear from you.